Hello?
Hello? Hello? Hello?
All right, well, you should be good. Tested the microphone a little bit ago. So your microphone's definitely working.
Awesome.
Libby, you said you're going to be talking as well during the meeting?
Hello, this is Troy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Stacy. This is Troy. Can you hear me? Hello, Stacy. This is Troy. Can anybody hear me?
Troy, this is Ed Thomas. I can hear you.
All right. Thank you. Hello.
Hi, Troy, this is Lizzie. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. All right. We'll give people another minute or so to get online for the organizers to get everybody muted. Stacy, just let me know when you're ready to go.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
All right, I got the go ahead from Stacy, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Troy Hamilton. I'm the first vice president of the SME Jacksonville Post. Unfortunately, Captain Monreal, who's the president, is unable to attend. He got pulled away last minute to do some briefs for Admiral Corp, the Chief of Civil Engineer Corps, in that fact. So I'll be leading the discussions today and doing kind of all the administrative work. So we'll start with welcoming everybody. Appreciate everybody joining us for this another virtual brief. Some are getting used to the virtual realm. So I'll go over some housekeeping things. Not speaking, which will help with the resolution. So also take a look at the bottom of your screen. Look for your chat box. You can put private and public chats during the presentation. Obviously, the public ones go to everybody. If you have a specific problem with connectivity or something like that, you can chat Stacy directly. Your questions in the chat box for everyone, or chat to all, however it's listed on your phone or your computer. Option anytime during the presentation. At the end of certificates are available, but you'll need to register. I know they sent a link out for this for anybody to join without registering, but if you would like a PDH, you'll have to let Stacy know or register. All right, this meeting is being recorded and will be available upon request. So contact Stacy Weber at the email address at the bottom of this slide. All right, next slide. All right, next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'll ask that you saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, can I get a sound check? Make sure I'm being heard and this is going okay from somebody?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you.
Sound good to me.
All right. Is anybody seeing did anybody see the pledge and the flag slide?
No, we're not seeing that.
I didn't get the flag slide either. Okay. All right. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Give it a second. There we go. All right. Next up is the prayer. I'll go ahead and say a prayer. If everybody would join me, bow your heads. Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for all the blessings you've given us, including this great nation. We ask that you provide comfort and understanding in this time of unrest. We especially pray for our leaders and first responders. Watch over our military, and especially those deployed in harm's way. May you bring them home safely. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Next on the agenda is the RSVP raffle drawing. As many of you know, that those who sign up early are enrolled in a contest for a raffle. This month we have awarded Rick Meeker of NHU Energy. He gets a Panera $20 gift card. Stacy will reach out to you directly to coordinate you getting that. So this is obviously to encourage those to register early and let us know that you're planning on coming, so it helps us with getting numbers. All right, on to announcements. Everybody can see the announcement slide because I'm seeing it, hopefully. 22 July is our centennial celebration and O&D induction. Unfortunately, due to COVID, this will be a closed program to invite only, mainly to the incoming O&D and current O&D, as well as a few SAME national representatives and regional vice president. So if you are a incoming O&D or current O&D, obviously you'll probably get an invite. Otherwise, you'll probably have to either watch it online or we might try to record it. We're still working on those details and more to follow on that. July 28th, we have another emergency preparedness brief. This will be by Siemens Smart Infrastructure Preparedness, Resilient and Resistant Facilities on 28 July. It'll be a WebEx forum. It will not be a monthly where we go through all the greetings and pledge and everything. It'll just be a straight WebEx information seminar type thing. And then similar on 25 August, emergency preparedness, we'll do a disaster recovery WebEx as well. So please look for more information on those. And then we will follow up with our August monthly meeting on 26 August, the day after, with FDOT. We'll talk about connected vehicles and use of technology as future of transportation. All right. Let's move on to the next slide. All right, want you to bring your attention to SAME Jacksonville's COVID-19 relief campaign. It's been ongoing for almost a month. We wrap it up this Friday. So as a reminder to all members, we continue to collect donations for students and veterans impacted by COVID-19. Campaign, as I said, closes this Friday. I want to thank all the individual and sustaining members who are contributed. If you haven't done so yet, to consider a donation for this cause. To donate, go to the link on the Post website. As of now, we've have roughly $2,400. Our goal is $10,000, and the Post has agreed to match up to the $10,000 mark. Obviously, if we get more, that's wonderful. But please encourage you to donate if you can. These are some of the members that have donated. So next slide. All right, these are our new and renewed members. So we want to thank you for either signing up as a new member or a renewed member from an existing membership. I'll give you a second to take a look at some of the names. Again, thank you. We look forward to seeing you hopefully in the near future, face to face. All right, next slide. All right, this is a picture of our SAME Puerto Rico field chapter. Fall 2019, the Jacksonville Post worked with our regional vice president, Cindy Miller, and national SAME to formalize reopening the Puerto Rico field chapter. March 26, 2020, the Jacksonville Post president, Cap Mike Monreal, signed the charter officializing the San Juan PR field chapter. As the SAME Jacksonville Post and our PR Puerto Rico field chapter embark on both the second century and the 2025 SAME strategic plan, the SAME San Juan field chapter was excited to kick off the year by hosting a sustaining member briefing on 12 March 2020. Present was keynote speaker Ron Terrell from Jacobs, representing SAME Regional Vice President Cindy Miller. Ron gave an excellent presentation on how the field chapter can make a difference in society and the local AEC community. Collaboration is key as we move onward towards celebrating the SAME Centennial and beyond. Good picture there with a good start to the Puerto Rico chapter. So look forward to seeing some of those folks. Next slide. All right, again, before we get started into today's presentation, just please keep your your microphones on mute, and please keep your video off. I urge you to use the chat button to post any questions, or if you have any problems, to contact Stacy. All right. With that, I'll go ahead and introduce our two speakers. First, I'll introduce Ed Thomas. He's the Director of Government Solutions at APR Energy. Ed is responsible for leading APR's newest business unit, providing energy security and energy resiliency solutions to the U.S. federal, state, and local governments. In this role, he's focused on delivering tailored power solutions to meet clients' unique needs, challenges, and requirements. Just as note, Ed was a prior Army infantry in the 75th Ranger Regiment, and then also looks like a Delta Force operator. So he's got some good military experience. We also have Libby Owen, who's the Sales Director in North America for APR Energy. Libby is responsible for the development and commercial execution of APR Energy's power projects throughout the Caribbean, U.S., and Canada. Libby most recently was responsible for APR's contracts to provide emergency power in Puerto Rico following Hurricanes Irma and Maria, as well as supplying generators and power generation services to Bahamas following devastation left by Hurricane Dorian. So welcome, Libby and Ed. I appreciate you coming and joining us and providing the presentation. I'll now turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right, Troy, can you hear us?
Ken, go ahead.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So today, Libby and I are going to talk about how APR Energy prepares for hurricanes. And through that, we produce how we also provide energy security and energy resiliency solutions for our customers. We're going to use a case study from what APR did in Puerto Rico in 2017 after Hurricanes Irma and Maria went through. And at the same time, we're going to draw some parallels between APR Energy and the military. Here's our agenda. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at 4 of APR's corporate values, and we're going to discuss how we use those for hurricane preparedness. And so when we talk about hurricane preparedness, we really just mean emergency preparedness. So for APR Energy, we're a global company, so our hurricane season is 24/7. We provide emergency power generation responses to earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, cyclones, typhoons, lightning strikes, and even droughts all across the globe during our 19 years in business. So through that, we will just address these 4 corporate values. This is really what we provide. This is what we do: energy security and energy resilience. We make sure people have access to energy, as well as handling any type of disruptions that people have with their energy. Make sure that their systems are resilient. So we've talked about APR Energy real quick. Leadership sets the culture for any organization. And this is our founder, John Campion, and he really created the culture here at APR Energy. John grew up in Ireland. He didn't finish high school, but he had a penchant for electricity. People described him as resourceful and creative and an out-of-the-box thinker and tinkerer. So in 1984, John immigrates to the U.S., and he literally has $26 in his pocket in New York City. And by 1986, John's out in Los Angeles. He's working as a roadie in the music industry, and he specializes in lighting. And at that time, Michael Jackson was having some sound issues with his performances, and he's talking to John and wanted John to look into it. And so when John did, he realized that Michael was having a power issue and not necessarily a sound issue. Michael asked John to look into it and see if he could fix it. And John told him, hey, if you give me $100,000, loan me $100,000, I can build you a couple of machines you'll be able to tour with, and it'll fix your problems. So Michael did, And John created a company called Show Power in 1987. And he provided power generation to almost every major rock band that toured from the late 80s all the way to the late 90s. So in 99, John ended up selling Show Power to General Electric. And John continued to work for General Electric in an executive role in their power segment. So really APR's culture, it's built on these same principles that John used in the rock and roll industry, and the same principles that permeate through the military and through other businesses. Basically, it's the show must go on mentality, the no fail mission mentality, and we'll get things done no matter what. So John's working for General Electric, and then in 2001, our current Chief Commercial Officer at APR Energy, Paul Markoff, is working for Alstom Power, and he was handed the responsibility to stand up their power rental business. Paul did a research in the market and was able to find John, and he lured John away from General Electric to come work for Alstom Power and to stand up their rental business. I'll hand it over to Libby to talk about the rest of our timeline.
So APR is born, let's say, Alstom Power Rentals. If you've heard of APR and you've ever wondered what the APR stands for, Alstom Power Rentals. So in 2004, we broke away from Alstom Power Rentals officially. And over the course of the past 16 years, we have been headquartered near Jacksonville, Florida. In 2016, I'll just note a few of the key milestones. 2016 brought the business full circle back to GE, in that APR acquired GE's turbine rental business. And earlier this year, APR was acquired by Atlas Corporation, a publicly listed company. And our sister company is Seaspan, who's the largest lessor of container ships in the world. So that was completed in February of this year. So we'll go to the next slide. So not to do a full-on sales pitch here, but just to give all of you that are unfamiliar with APR a little bit more color on what we do. Our value proposition is simple. We combine speed, flexibility, and turnkey solutions that power cities and industries in a few weeks, and not necessarily years. We provide our customers with a solution that doesn't require upfront financing or permitting, ultimately providing affordable power fast all around the globe. We are the global leader in delivering expedited power solutions based upon, for the most part, our mobile gas turbine technology. We own a fleet of gas turbines, generators, balance of plant equipment, and ultimately we build, own, and operate on a turnkey basis with modular and scalable power plants. Typical customers are utilities. However, we have supplied oil and gas, mining, military, and industrial clients around the globe. Typical project size is around 20 to 200 megawatts. We've done projects up to 500 megawatts in size, but core business is 20 to 200 megawatts. So now we're not only focusing on the rental or temporary power space, but with the recent acquisition, we're looking into an expanded business profile, which we'll touch upon later in the presentation. The advantage for APR is that we not only own our equipment, but we basically do everything in-house on a turnkey basis. We build, own, and operate our own turnkey power plants, typically selling customers kilowatts to fixed and flexible pricing, ultimately providing a hassle-free approach to our customers, allowing our customers to focus on their core business. We provide a full suite of services. We provide all the project planning, design and engineering work, logistics, permitting, installation, commissioning, operation, and security, sometimes fuel management. And ultimately, it's a one-stop shop. And last sales pitch slide, I promise. Since 2004, we've delivered over 5 gigawatts of power to over 40 countries, spanning across 6 continents. No surprise, the only continent we haven't done business is in Antarctica. So we are, like I said, headquartered in Jacksonville, but we have offices and strategic hubs around the globe in all continents.
Here's APR's 8 corporate values. And today we're going to address 4 of these. We're going to talk about speed, trust, global, and performance. And at the same time, we're going to draw parallels mentioned both how APR and the military, we use these values to accomplish our respective missions. So for us, these values are embedded in our corporate culture from almost 3 decades of refinement from John's Ruck.
Ed, we lost.
Or we're going to face financial penalties. Another value that John quote is under trust. John said, we like to go to difficult places and do difficult things with like-minded people. So for us, employing and working with like-minded people that we trust is essential. And for us, it's make sure that we hire the right person, not necessarily the best person. That person needs to be able to fit in with our culture. So the four values that we're going to address today, I'm going to talk first about speed. Before you can do anything fast, you need to understand the environment that you're going to be operating in. And this requires boots on the ground. You need to get boots on the ground. You need to understand what that ground truth is. So that way you can act quickly and make sound and timely decisions. So whether this is a military or a commercial organization or an NGO or an IGO, this just has to happen. But especially when you're working and responding to an emergency, getting boots on the ground will allow you to go faster, but it has to happen. You need to know what that truth is. And when you are working in an emergency and you do have boots on the ground, you're never going to have 100% of the information that you think you're going to need to make a decision. So you really need to be comfortable with making decisions based on 70% of the information that you have. You just need to make sure that that 70% is actually true and accurate. And again, having your own people on the ground that you trust is hugely important. When we talk about emergencies, a couple points we always talk about here at APR is that in almost every situation that we've seen, early reporting is usually false reporting. And at a minimum, it's been incomplete reporting. So we just need to continue to understand that, just stay involved with the situation. And as that situation develops, we get more information and we know the situation becomes clear. And that leads us to the second point that we learned here is that the truth changes as the situation develops. So again, we stay flexible, we stay involved in the environment, in the situation, especially in the early stages of an emergency, because we know that that truth is going to grow as the situation grows. So to be able to put boots on the ground, somebody in there early, for us, we need to make sure that we hire, we train, and we retain the right type of person. As I mentioned, they have to fit into our culture. They have to have the expeditionary mindset, and we need to be able to be onto the ground early in an emergency, understand what our strategic end state is. They need to be able to process information quickly, not be afraid to make decisions. Really, in the military, these are the same type of people that we've had from the beginning of time. You call them whatever you want, reconnaissance, scouts, long-range surveillance, long-range reconnaissance patrols, advanced force operations, whatever. But the job in the military for folks like this is always going to get on the ground early, collect actionable intelligence, and set the stage for follow-on operations. And so these people usually have that pioneering entrepreneurial type mindset, and we find that it's no different from what we do here at APR when we respond to emergencies.
Sorry, quick audio check. So to the ultimate meat of the presentation, which is really based upon our experience in Puerto Rico immediately after. So as if you're in Jacksonville, I'm sure you remember the devastation that we felt after Hurricane Irma. But before Irma hit us, it slammed into the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. While the evacuation out of the USPI was in full swing, this was in September of 2017. A couple weeks later, Hurricane Maria touched down, slamming into Puerto ago. So many of those that were being evacuated from the USCI that were traveling to or through Puerto Rico were actually in Puerto Rico when Hurricane Maria touched down. The storm followed a very similar path, but sat over
Libby, this is Troy. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Can you get a little bit closer to the mic so that we can hear you a little bit better?
Is that better?
Yes, better. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So as we know, Hurricane Maria sat on Puerto Rico for nearly 24 hours, completely decimating the island. The aftermath was almost even worse, as critical care facilities such as hospitals, nursing homes went without power. Safe drinking water, access to food was limited. Communications were down across the island. Crime became rampant. And if you've been to Puerto Rico, you know that it's incredibly mountainous terrain. As I was quite surprised the first time I went to Puerto Rico, much larger than I expected, with over 3.4 million people at the time. And it very quickly became a hugely complex humanitarian crisis. So talking a little bit about our projects in Puerto Rico. So just 3 days after Hurricane Maria, a team of APR and GE personnel, including myself, we flew to Puerto Rico, not really knowing where we were going to stay, what the ultimate status on the ground. So we touched ground and immediately set up shop at the convention center, which doubled as the joint operations center for the US military, FEMA, federal, local agencies, and aid groups. A few weeks after the hurricane, and under the leadership of FEMA, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was called in to support. The U6 HQ turned to the Omaha district and its rapid response technical center of expertise to solve the overall power issue. And they were ultimately assigned the power mission. So this group, working with FEMA and the Puerto Rico Electric Power Utility Authority, which is the utility in Puerto Rico, they executed a rapid disaster infrastructure multiple award task order contract, which ultimately totaled over $200 million, and expedited a full and open contract solicitation to select a prime contractor to install and provide two 25-megawatt generators at one of PREPA's key substations and power plants in and around the greater San Juan area. And that power plant was Palo Seco. That's the photo that you see here. So once that solicitation was released, the overall contract was expedited and it was awarded in 5 days. And APR was very well positioned based upon what we do in our area of expertise to be awarded as the subcontractor. That was awarded to Weston. But APR essentially took on the bulk of the scope of supply, which included the supply of fuel, which was a pretty tricky situation to figure out in Puerto Rico at the time. Also, full-on civil works, the installation, commissioning of the power plant. We connected into PREPA's 115 kV transformer. And when we commissioned the plant, the governor was there. It was pretty interesting time. Commissioned the plant in 17 days after signing our contract. And then we were responsible for 24/7 operational maintenance. And that project lasted about 16 months. A couple of weeks after that project was commissioned, we were awarded another contract as a subcontractor in area in the southeastern area of Puerto Rico that was actually the hardest hit, both from Irma and Maria, because the storms came across the southeast corner of the island, and that area was called Yabucoa. And we installed another 25 megawatt gas turbine at the Yabucoa plant, and that was done in about 30 days. So this slide is just a high-level timeline of the overall power mission. Sorry, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me a bit better. Can someone give me a sound check and let me know if you can hear me okay?
That's a little better. Thank you.
So this slide is just, kind of a high-level overview of the project from its inception all the way through to the demobilization. So both of those contracts were in place. They helped to stabilize the overall power grid in Puerto Rico. We were delivering power directly to PREPA, and both of those power stations were not only providing critical megawatts into the power grid, but also helping to stabilize the overall grid, given the massive damage to the transmission and distribution lines across the island.
We talked about our first value of speed. Some of the key takeaways that we found is just there they are there, right? But really, it's the ground truth. And you have the right people to get on the ground early and sort through the information. And also, just again, for those people to make sure they're wary of any type of early report that's usually false, and again, do some critical thinking and work their way through the situation. The second and third values that we're going to talk about are global and trust. The guy on the left is General C.C. Krulak. And in 1999, he was the commandant of the Marine Corps. And he wrote an article called The Strategic Corporal in the Three Block War. Really, a summary of that article is that leaders in the Marine Corps, all the way down to the corporal level, need to understand what the strategic end state is for any mission, so they're armed to be able to make the right tactical decisions to meet their strategic end states. One of his quotes in his article was that Marines corporals need to, quote, confidently make well-reasoned and independent decisions under extreme stress, unquote. So this is no different from combat or any other type of emergency. Folks need to know what the strategic end state is. And the book on the right is The World is Flat by Tom Friedman. It came out in 2005. It's very popular in the military, especially over in Afghanistan and Iraq. One of the concepts in that book is to flatten the organization. And instead of keeping all the information with senior leadership and certain leadership, as much information as possible, all information should be pushed as fast as possible to the entire organization, so that way the correct people have the correct information at the correct time so they can make correct decisions. Again, also to meet a strategic end state. So when you have, especially for an emergency, when you have smaller teams operating independently, but they're armed with the correct information, the authority to make decisions, these are very effective in dynamic, stressful situations, like I said, such as emergencies. And what the military's learned from the beginning of time is that to be able to operate globally with decentralized command, you have to have trust and you need to empower your own people. And so you also know that no organization is perfect. People are going to fail. People are going to make mistakes. You have to accept it and you have to embrace it, as long as they continue to not make the same mistakes over and over again. And so if you don't have that trust within your own organization, you're never going to have trust outside of your organization, either with a partner or with your customers. And so we all know, like in life, no one does anything alone. We're always going to have good relationships and good customers. And so for us, we found that these relationships, they're complementary, not competitive. So we focus on our strengths, which is producing power, but we also outsource and manage some of our weaknesses and things that we're not that good at. That's where we come in with our partnerships. Again, from the beginning of time, militaries have known this and they've done this. There's been alliances, coalitions, unions, leagues, et cetera. And even within our own government and executive branch during the global war on terror, we had at times, we've had a whole of government approach. So overseas in Afghanistan, Iraq, you have the intelligence community. They had a unique set of tools and information authorities that they would provide. The Defense Department would own the battle space. They had a different set of authorities. They had the cool guns, cool bombs, land and air power. We brought that to the table. And the FBI, they had legal expertise when American citizens were involved. And they understood court orders and warrants. And so just a couple of examples, some of the interagency partners and how they came together and what parts they did, what parts they brought to the table. And so each member of these alliances, they bring a set of skills and perspectives that makes the whole greater than the sum of its parts.
Just building upon what Ed was touching upon. So I have to say that APR, in terms of delivering power quickly in very adverse situations and often risky environments, Puerto Rico was no different. However, there was expanded scope for the overall project requirements, just because of the devastation on the island. And without our local partners, we would not have been successful in delivering those projects as quickly as we did. So like I mentioned earlier, APR subcontract agreement, we were responsible for fuel supply, all civils, the providing the technology, the installation, commissioning, and the operation and maintenance, as well as all of the security. So we, in advance of the storms, we had spent quite a bit of time in Puerto Rico, looking, from a business development standpoint. And so we had already established a few key local relationships that were ultimately driven down from some of our regional or global relationships, particularly with General Electric and the fuel supplier. So ultimately, my key takeaway here is that those trusted partnerships lent themselves perfectly to the success of these projects, and we were able to enter into partnership agreements to where we both leveraged for Palo Seco sites and also for Yabucoa.
So we talked about second, third values of APR here. Some of our key takeaways. Again, flatten that organization, trust your people. When you build relationships, focus on your strengths and build relationships and partner with folks who are going to be able to address your weaknesses. And again, choose your partners wisely, because as we all know, sometimes divorce sucks. So choosing wisely the first time and getting into the good relationships. The final value we're going to talk about is performance. So whether it's the military, it's a sports team, or it's a commercial organization, they all use same thing, just by different names. Whether it's an after-action review, a hot wash, a debrief, watching game film, it's all the same thing. It's an opportunity to review an event, what happened, analyze what went right, what went wrong, and how we can do things better in the future. And so whenever you do that, organizations, they take that information and they share it with other people, and those other people, as well as that organization, can implement that into their training and culture to gain benefit from it. And so, the Army and after the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, they were learning at such a great rate. They felt the need to capture this information so that it could be shared with incoming organizations, as well as these organizations, when they went back to their home station, that they could now implement this into their training, so that way they could, before they deployed overseas. And so they actually created the Center for Army Lessons Learned in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, specifically to capture all of these lessons learned, disseminate that information, not just across the Army, but across all the armed services, and ultimately to update doctrine for folks when necessary. And so all of that's done to drive performance. And so another way that the military uses to drive performance is self-imposed standards. Strict adherence to high standards and training. And back at home, this allows individuals and organizations to use those new standards overseas whenever they go into real emergency events. And again, whether that's responding to a hurricane, responding to an earthquake, going into combat. The old saying is you should train as you fight. So when you have higher standards back at home, in your home station, you're going to carry those standards forward with you and do a better job and have higher performance whenever you are performing your mission for real.
And just to close out on the performance piece, so I think this is interesting for any of those that are participating on the call. Kind of what is the future state of Puerto Rico as it relates to the electrical power grid? So we know that there are still billions of dollars of federal aid that will be flowing into Puerto Rico in various sectors and agencies over the next few years. Ultimately to rebuild homes and medical facilities, and what we're focusing on is the power grid. And a component of that, smaller component versus the transmission and distribution, is ultimately on generation. So this slide here is the forward future looking state as to what PREPA is expecting to do They are writing their, or close to completing their integrated resource plan. And we believe that the success from our projects immediately after the storms, the mobility and the modularity and the quick response time for those plants and the benefits that those megawatts ultimately provided into the overall power grid were used as part of the new integrated resource plan, where PREPA is looking to replace some of their old antiquated equipment, quote unquote, peaking units with microgrids or mini grids is what they're actually calling them in Puerto Rico. And so you can see here at this top slide, the 8 different microgrids that are being planned in Puerto Rico, and these are ultimately expected to be supplied by mobile gas turbine technology, very similar, if not the same, to what we provided previously. So key takeaway here is, stellar performance and track record leads to future opportunities and future potential success.
So, last 30 minutes or so, we talked about how APR Energy, how we use 4 of our corporate values to respond to emergencies. Pretty sure that we haven't told anyone anything they didn't already know, right? Nothing we've said is earth-shattering, but it's always the basics, right? This is what we do. This is how we've been responding to global emergencies for the last 19 years, and we focus on these 4 core values. And it's helped us. So hopefully at some point today during a conversation, we said we didn't teach you anything, but hopefully we at least reminded you of some of these things that you already knew. So at this point, I think, Troy, this is probably where I hand it over to you. And if we have any questions, we will take them.
Thank you very much, Ed and Libby. Let me see if I can get to my chat. I think we have, so there's a question, will the presentation be available to attendees today? Yes, it was recorded, it should be available. So please submit using the chat with everyone function. If you have a question, I'm going to go ahead with my own question here. Appreciate you providing the future state of Puerto Rico, because that was one of my questions as I was writing and listening. But a follow-on question is, how did APR Energy flatten the organization? I know you talk about it in the book and the agility and the speed. So how did your organization do that, and how did it provide that success?
Yeah, thanks for that, Troy. Yeah, and really, it's a small organization, and so we worked in small teams. And so even when we flew down there, John was with our chief operating officer and Libby when they went down there, and it went straight from John. Didn't go from John to the chief operating officer to Libby. It went straight from John to Libby. Hey, here's the strategic end state. Here's what we need, and here's what you're going to do. Right? Here's what we need you to do. And so even for me, I wasn't going through my first layer, but everything was coming directly from John, or when John wasn't there, it was coming directly from our boss. And it was from those guys being present and those guys being engaged throughout the whole organization. And each of us here have the ability to go, we still have a chain of command, right? And we still have to respect that. But we also have that ability to go point to point with senior leadership if we have a question, if there's something that's going on that we need a quick answer for. And so we kind of cut through those different layers by having a direct line to our leaders, and those leaders stay engaged and stay involved, so that way they know what's going on and they're able to provide that guidance. And if I could add one more thing, Troy, also, we continued to have daily video teleconferences. We continue to have daily updates. We use a lot of military terms here, right? So we have our sit reps. We provide a daily sit rep. What happened the last 24 hours? What's happening this 24 hours? What's going to happen the next 24 hours? So it's really through constant communication with all of our organization, and all the organization was involved in these video teleconferences, all pertinent information organization, especially the people that were in Puerto Rico. We definitely were all involved in it.
Okay, appreciate it. I think we have a question here with the recent trend of earthquakes in Puerto Rico. Does that influence the placement of the power equipment? What effects have earthquakes had on existing projects?
Hi, thank you for the question, and it's a great question. Actually, Ed and I were down in Puerto Rico shortly after the major earthquakes in January. I spent, I don't know, just up until the coronavirus really got bad here in the States. I was there up until the middle of March, so I was feeling the earthquakes. I spent a lot of time down on the South Coast, which is where the earthquakes, for the most part, the major earthquakes were occurring. So the question asked, does that influence the placement of the power equipment and what effects have earthquakes had on existing projects? So I would say in terms of the first part of that, and the recent trend of earthquakes, yes, it can potentially influence the placement of the power equipment. But kind of tying this back to the major issue from the hurricanes is that the majority of the power generation in Puerto Rico, the generation is in the south, the population is in the north. And there are high voltage transmission lines that run from the south to the north. And then of course, lower voltage, distribution systems in place. So when those 155 mile per hour sustained winds sat on Puerto Rico for almost 24 hours, those high voltage lines were severely damaged. And with the generation being in the south of the island, that was ultimately the driver for the total collapse of the island, coupled with the fact that these are overhead lines and they're not necessarily most of the system is not actually underground. So the situation with the hurricanes, the major drivers or the major issues were with the transmission and distribution. With the earthquakes, that was a generation issue because the plant in the south that supplies about 1/5 of the power generation to the people of Puerto Rico, that was severely damaged. That power plant is called the Costa Sur Power Plant. And right now, PREPA is working 24/7 to get that plant back online. But that has been a loss of, 800 or so megawatts to the power grid since the earthquakes occurred. So now moving forward and looking at where, future projects are going to be placed, it could have an impact on the integrated resource plan and the future of planning for projects in the South Coast, specifically where the Costa Sur plant is located, and how that's going to potentially impact things moving forward.
All right, thanks, Libby. A comment came in from Ron from Tetra Tech. So I'll just read it. At approximately 126 million cubic feet of natural gas consumed per day in Puerto Rico and 100% power outages post-hurricane, 17 days to get up in operation is admirable, but about preventive measures to reduce outages to hours instead of days. Building in same location as what went down should only expect the same to happen. I don't know if you all want to make a comment on that.
Thanks for the comment. I guess tying that back to kind of my explanation from before, the locations that were determined by the collective Army Corps of Engineers and PREPA and the various consultants that were involved, including I think it was the New York Power Authority and Con Ed, and there were a lot of really smart people evaluating the overall grid and determining which locations after the hurricanes would be the best to ultimately inject power into the grid. So I think you're absolutely right in terms of the preventative measures that need to be taken to reduce outages. And actually PREPA decided to purchase 3 turbines after our contract ended, to purchase 3 turbines for the Palo Seco power plant so that they could have those in place prior to anything, any natural disasters impacting the grid moving forward. And I know that there's a lot of aid relief and there's plans to rebuild the power grid to make the overall power grid more resilient. I think a part of that plan is to bury the transmission lines for certain areas and certain loops within the overall power grid.
Okay, thanks, Libby. Got another question in from Tony Betrago from the Jax Post. How did you address logistics to operate the generators during your response, fuel, maintenance, in the early days of your deployment when supplying Puerto Rico was chaotic?
It's another great question, and it was challenging to say the least. But you know, it came down to past relationships that we had. We actually went to we put out our own RFP for the fuel supply, and you know, this was, yes, in a very chaotic situation. But for Palo Seco specifically, fortunately, there were already fuel supply lines that were running from the Puma Energy Caribe's main fuel location directly to the Palo Seco power station. So what we were able to do is we were able to, number one, negotiate a good rate for the fuel supply. And it was, you know, kind of a no-brainer, at least for Palo Seco, that we would work with Puma because they already had the diesel lines that ran from their supply location to the power plant. And so we relied upon that relationship to ultimately take responsibility for the fuel supply, because that fell to APR and then flowed down through to the fuel supplier. And then in regard to maintenance, so our typical structure for maintenance of our equipment is we want to hire local anywhere we go. Our goal is to have, you know, at least 80% of our staff that we're hiring on the ground that we can train and then potentially, you know, transfer those skill sets on, you know, to their future if there's not an opportunity with APR. But we've also transitioned or hired people on full time that have started off as a contractor. So in terms of the maintenance, we had a team on the ground. We call them quote unquote expats. It's the US, but I'll call them expats for this point. And then we hired, you know, a lot of really talented individuals that, you know, quite a few of them now work full time for APR. And so we maintained a team of about 20 or so people who took care of the 24/7 operation and maintenance of that equipment.
All right, looks like that's all I have for questions. We're about out of time, so I'll go ahead and take the opportunity to thank you both, Ed and Libby. Definitely appreciate the presentation. Definitely sounds like a challenging project and challenging work down in a chaotic area, as someone said. So appreciate you being here and sharing with us. Normally, if we were together, I would have a small token of appreciation, like a SAME mug or pin like that. So I'll ask that Stacy, our programs person, reach out to you and figure out how to get that to you. So again, appreciate the opportunity and you sharing with us. So did you have any last few words you'd like to say before we
Yeah, I just like to thank everyone for the time and for taking an interest in this topic. We appreciate all the support from the Society of American Military Engineers. And if anyone would like to get in contact with Ed or I, our contact details are included within the presentation. So our cell phone and emails, so feel free to reach out anytime.
Yeah, I just like to thank you guys. Troy, thanks for hosting this today on short notice, and just thank everybody out there for what you guys do in the engineering world. It's much needed and necessary. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks again for the presentation. Great job. As far as the post, appreciate everybody's attendance and look forward to the upcoming events here next month in July. Hopefully we have a great centennial celebration and OND induction on the 22nd of July. Other than that, signing out. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Troy.